James returned to his apartment, stopping to water his succulents. On his wall hung a small painting May had done, now finally out of storage. Below it, he'd placed the newspaper article about Tesla Village with its headline, "Tech Giant Redefines Corporate Responsibility." He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from sleeping in his car to helping create a community that would change thousands of lives, from hiding his struggles to being part of the solution. From his balcony, he could see the Tesla factory in the distance, its lights shining bright against the darkening sky. But now it wasn't just a workplace, it was part of a larger community, a symbol of what was possible when people cared enough to make a change. "We did it, May," he whispered to the evening air. "We kept our promise. We made something beautiful." And in apartments all around him, families were settling into their new homes, children were falling asleep in their own beds, and people who had once felt lost and alone were finally finding their place in the world. The nightmare of housing insecurity was ending, replaced by the dawn of a new day. A day where corporate responsibility meant more than just paying a salary. It meant creating a true community where everyone had a chance to thrive. 6 months had passed since that fateful night when Elon Musk discovered James sleeping in his car. The morning sun rose over a completely transformed landscape. Where there had once been empty land, Tesla Village now stood proud, a testament to what was possible when a company truly cared for its people. Moving day had arrived for the first group of residents. The streets were alive with activity as moving trucks pulled up one after another. Children ran excitedly through the newly paved streets, pointing out their new homes to anyone who would listen. Parents carried boxes with tears of joy in their eyes, still hardly believing this was real. James stood at the entrance of his new apartment, key in hand. The morning light streamed through the large, energy-efficient windows, illuminating the space that was about to become his home. He walked through each room slowly, taking it all in. The kitchen gleamed with energy-efficient appliances. The living room walls were the perfect shade of blue, just like the color May had always wanted. On his small balcony, he had already set up a collection of succulent plants, a tribute to May's memory. But now they represented something more: new life, new growth, new beginnings. "How does it feel?" Musk asked, appearing in the doorway. He had come to welcome the first residents personally. "It feels like..." James paused, searching for the right words. "It feels like waking up from a long nightmare. But this time, I'm not the only one waking up." They walked together through the community, watching as families move into their new homes. The community center was already bustling with activity. Children played in the safely designed playground while their parents arranged furniture and unpacked boxes. The solar panels on every roof gleamed in the sunlight, powering each home with clean, free energy. In the central plaza, a group of residents had set up a welcome station with coffee and snacks. People who had once been strangers, united only by their struggles, were now becoming neighbors, friends, a community. "Remember that engineer who was sleeping in the gym?" James asked, pointing to a man helping his elderly mother move into a ground-floor unit. "He's starting a community exercise class next week. Says he wants to help others stay healthy and strong." The transformation wasn't just in the buildings. You could see it in people's faces, in their posture, in the way they carried themselves. The dark circles under eyes were fading, replaced by genuine smiles. The exhaustion of long commutes and housing stress was giving way to energy and hope. Later that afternoon, the community gathered for an informal celebration in the central plaza. Someone had brought out speakers, playing soft music. Children chased each other around the newly planted trees, while adults shared stories and plans for the future. A woman approached James, her eyes bright with tears. "My daughter got her own room today," she said. "She's never had her own room before. She spent an hour just sitting in there, looking at the walls, planning where to put her books." Stories like this echoed throughout the day. The factory worker who could now walk to his shift instead of driving 3 hours. The young couple who could finally start saving for their future. The single father who no longer had to choose between paying rent and buying his children's school supplies. As evening approached, Musk stood on the small stage that had been set up in the plaza. The crowd gathered, many still in their moving clothes, to listen. 6 months ago, he began, we discovered something important. We learned that building the future isn't just about creating new technologies, It's about taking care of the people who make those technologies possible. He gestured to the buildings around them. Tesla Village isn't just a housing project, it's a promise. A promise that working hard and contributing to innovation shouldn't mean sacrificing a decent place to live. A promise that companies can and should do more for their workers. The crowd applauded, but Musk wasn't finished. But the real success story isn't in these buildings. It's in what's happening right now. Look around you. Strangers becoming neighbors. Co-workers becoming friends. People who were struggling alone now supporting each other. James watched from the side of the stage, thinking about how much had changed. Not just for him, but for hundreds of families. And this was just the beginning. Other companies were already following Tesla's lead, developing their own housing programs. The ripple effects were spreading across Silicon Valley and beyond. As the sun set on that first day, residents gathered in small groups on their balconies and in the community spaces. The solar-powered lights came on automatically, casting a warm glow over the new community. Children's laughter echoed from the playground, and the smell of home-cooked meals wafted from open windows. The next morning brought more progress. The first solar panels were being unloaded from trucks, their surfaces gleaming in the morning light. A team of electricians began installing the advanced power systems that would make each unit energy independent. In the project office, a wall displayed photos of future residents, families, singles, elderly parents living with their children. Each had a story, each had struggled, and each would soon have a place to call home. "We're not just building houses," Musk said during a site inspection. "We're building a community. We're showing the world that companies can do more than just pay a salary. They can help create stability, security, and hope." As the day wound down, a small ceremony marked the completion of the first building's frame. Workers signed the final beam before it was lifted into place. James watched as it rose against the sky, carrying hundreds of signatures, hundreds of people who were part of this change. The sun set over Tesla Village, casting long shadows across the construction site. Tomorrow would bring more progress, more hope, more proof that sometimes the biggest innovations aren't in technology, but in how we take care of each other. The construction site buzzed with activity under the California sun. Yellow hard hats dotted the landscape as workers moved purposefully across what would soon become Tesla Village. In just 6 weeks, the empty lot had transformed into a promising foundation for something revolutionary. James stood at the edge of the site, wearing his own hard hat, watching as the first set of walls went up. As head of the Resident Advisory Committee, he'd been given special permission to monitor the progress. Each beam, each wall represented another family who wouldn't have to face what he had gone through. "Pretty amazing, isn't it?" a voice said behind him. James turned to find Elon Musk, also in a hard hat, surveying the construction. "We're actually ahead of schedule." "The teams are motivated," James replied with a smile. "Half of them will be living here too. Makes a difference when you're building your own future home." They walked together through the site, stepping carefully around construction materials. The foundation for the community center was already complete, and the first row of housing units was taking shape. Solar panel installations would begin next week. "How are the applications coming along?" Musk asked, stopping to examine a set of blueprints with a site supervisor. "We've received over 1,000 applications so far," James said. "The stories, some of them are just like mine. People choosing between medicine and rent, families living in their cars, 4-hour commutes. But now there's hope." The implementation plan was moving faster than anyone had expected. The moment word got out about Tesla Village, support had poured in from unexpected places. Local officials, typically slow with permits, had fast-tracked the project. Other companies had reached out, asking to learn from Tesla's model. Even competitors were showing interest in creating similar programs for their own workers. At the weekly progress meeting that afternoon, the room was packed with excitement. Linda from HR stood up to give her update. "The first phase of resident selection is complete," she announced. "We've identified 200 families who will move in as soon as the first units are ready. Priority was given to those in immediate housing crisis, followed by those with the longest commutes." The project manager pulled up the construction timeline on the screen. "We're 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The first block of units will be ready in 4 months instead of 6. Solar installation begins next Monday, and the community center foundation is already cured." But it wasn't just about construction. The whole company had rallied around the project in unexpected ways. The engineering team had developed new energy-efficient systems that would cut utility costs even further. The design team had created shared spaces that would bring the community together. Even the cafeteria staff had volunteered to help plan the community kitchen program. Later that day, Musk visited the temporary housing where many Tesla employees were staying while waiting for their new homes. In the common room, he found a group of workers gathered around a laptop, watching the live construction camera feed of Tesla Village. "That's going to be my daughter's room," one worker said, pointing to a half-finished wall. "She's already planning how to decorate it. First real room she's had in 2 years. Another employee chimed in, "My commute will go from 3 hours to 10 minutes. Do you know what that means? I'll be able to have dinner with my family every night." The impact was already visible in the workplace. Productivity had increased, sick days had decreased, and employee morale was at an all-time high. People who had been living in constant stress about housing were now able to focus on their work, knowing they had a secure future to look forward to. Back at the construction site, the sun was setting as the day shift wrapped up. James stayed behind, walking through what would soon be the community gardens. He stopped at a particular spot, pulling something from his pocket, a small succulent plant, like the ones May used to grow. "You were right," he said quietly, as if speaking to her. "I didn't give up. And now we're helping others hold on too." Musk smiled, remembering something his father had once told him: the true measure of innovation isn't just in what you create, but in how it changes people's lives. As he gathered his papers and headed back to his office, he could feel the energy in the building. Something had shifted. They weren't just a car company anymore. They were becoming something more. A model for how companies could truly take care of their people. The sun was setting over the factory as workers from the day shift headed home, some to long commutes, others to temporary housing, a few to their cars. But soon, very soon, they would all have a place to call home. A real home, right here in the community they helped build. This, Musk thought, is what changing the world really looks like. The Tesla boardroom was unusually crowded that morning. Department heads, architects, financial advisors, and legal teams filled every seat, with more people standing along the walls. The excitement in the room was palpable as Elon Musk walked in, carrying a thick folder of documents and designs. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the energy of someone who had discovered something groundbreaking, "what you're about to see isn't just a housing project. It's a complete reimagining of how we take care of our people." The lights dimmed, and the first slides appeared on the massive screen. 3D renderings showed a modern community with sleek buildings nestled among green spaces. Solar panels glinted on every roof, and walking paths wound between community gardens and shared spaces. "We're calling it Tesla Village," Musk announced. "Phase 1 will cover our 30 acres near the factory. But this isn't just about building houses, it's about building a future where our employees can thrive, not just survive." He clicked to the next slide, showing the internal layout of the homes. Every unit will be equipped with Tesla solar panels and Powerwall batteries. Residents will have almost zero energy bills. The buildings themselves will be constructed using new sustainable materials that our engineering team has been developing. The head of finance raised his hand. "The cost of this, it's significant. How do we make this work financially?" Musk smiled. "That's where the innovation comes in. We're not just building housing, we're creating a new model of employee support." He pulled up a spreadsheet. "We've run the numbers. The average Tesla employee spends over $3,000 a month on housing and commuting. We can offer these units for half that amount." He continued through the presentation, explaining how employees could earn equity in their units through years of service, how the community would include childcare facilities, reducing another major expense for working families, how the shorter commutes would increase productivity and job satisfaction. "But here's the real game changer," Musk said, pulling up a new slide. "We're partnering with local banks to create a special financing program. Every hour an employee works at Tesla will count toward their home equity. Think of it as a new kind of pension plan, one that gives people a real stake in their future." The room buzzed with excitement as he explained the details. The legal team had already started working on the framework. The engineering department had ideas for making the buildings even more energy efficient. HR was developing a points system for unit allocation that considered factors like family size and years of service. What about James? Someone asked from the back of the room. The engineer who started all this? Musk's expression softened. James will be one of our first residents. In fact, he's already agreed to head up the Resident Advisory Committee. His experience will help us make sure we're truly meeting our people's needs. The presentation continued, showing community spaces designed to bring people together. A central plaza with cafes and small shops, green spaces where children could play, walking trails that connected different parts of the community. Everything was designed to create a sense of belonging, not just a place to sleep. We've always said that Tesla's mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, Musk said, nearing the end of his presentation. But sustainability isn't just about the environment. It's about creating systems that allow people to build stable, meaningful lives. He clicked to the final slide, showing a timeline for the project. Phase 1 begins next month. We've already fast-tracked the permits. The first units will be ready in 6 months. By this time next year, we'll have housing for 500 families. The room erupted in applause, but Musk held up his hand. This isn't just about Tesla. We're going to make all our plans and systems open source, just like we did with our patents. Any company can use our model to create their own employee housing programs. This is about changing how corporations think about their responsibility to their workers. As the meeting ended and people filed out of the room, the excitement was contagious. Engineers were already discussing improvements to the solar systems. HR was planning the application process. The legal team was scheduling meetings with city officials to expedite permits. Musk stayed behind, looking at the 3D rendering of Tesla Village still displayed on the screen. He thought about James, about all the other employees struggling to keep a roof over their heads while helping build the future of transportation. His phone buzzed, a message from James. "Just saw the plans," it read. "This isn't just housing, this is hope." His assistant found him still working when she arrived at 7 a.m., spreadsheets and coffee cups scattered across his desk. "Cancel my morning meetings," he told her, not looking up from his computer, "and get me the head of our legal team. We're going to need to create a new division of Tesla, one that nobody saw coming." As the sun rose over the Tesla factory, employees began arriving for another day of work. Some had been driving since 4 a.m. to beat the traffic. Others had spent the night in their cars, just like James had. But none of them knew that things were about to change dramatically. Musk looked at the final draft of his proposal. It wasn't just a housing plan, it was a complete reimagining of how a company could care for its workers. Solar-powered homes, innovative financing options, and community spaces that would bring people together instead of forcing them to live hours apart. He saved the document and sat back in his chair, watching the morning light spread across Silicon Valley. Sometimes the biggest problems needed the boldest solutions, and if there was one thing Elon Musk wasn't afraid of, it was being bold. "Time to change the game," he said quietly, reaching for his phone to set the next phase of the plan in motion. That night, Elon Musk couldn't sleep. He sat in his home office, surrounded by spreadsheets, employee surveys, and housing market reports. The blue light from his computer screen cast shadows across the room as he dug deeper into the lives of his workforce. What he found kept him awake far into the early hours of the morning. He pulled up an anonymous employee survey from 6 months ago. The responses painted a picture he couldn't unsee. A single mother working in quality control was living in a motel with her 2 kids. An engineering team leader was sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other families. A talented software developer had been sleeping in the company gym when he thought nobody was around. "How did we miss this?" he muttered to himself, rubbing his tired eyes. The numbers on his screen told a story that went far beyond James's situation. Despite Tesla's competitive salaries, the combination of student loans, medical bills, and the Bay Area's skyrocketing housing costs was crushing even his most skilled workers. His phone buzzed, a message from Linda in HR. She'd been working late too, compiling data he'd requested. "You need to see this," her message read, followed by a detailed breakdown of employee finances. The average Tesla worker was spending 68% of their take-home pay on housing alone. Add in student loans, and that number climbed even higher. Musk opened his laptop to another tab. An article about the Bay Area housing crisis. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment had doubled in the past 5 years. Home prices had risen so sharply that even workers making six-figure salaries were struggling to save for down payments. He thought about James, about how a single medical crisis had pushed even a highly paid engineer into homelessness. It wasn't just about money, it was about the fragility of the system itself. One emergency, one unexpected bill, and everything could fall apart. At 3 a.m., he started mapping out employees' commute patterns. Red dots appeared on his screen, spreading out in a spiderweb from the Tesla factory. Some workers were driving 4 hours round trip every day. The human cost was staggering: time away from family, excessive fuel costs, increased stress and fatigue. He opened another file, a list of properties Tesla owned in the area. Most were being held for future expansion, but as he studied the locations, an idea began to take shape. One property in particular caught his eye. A 30-acre plot just 3 miles from the factory. It had been purchased years ago for a project that never materialized. Pulling out a blank piece of paper, Musk began sketching. The engineering part of his brain kicked in, approaching the housing crisis like he would approach designing a new battery or rocket engine. If they could build electric cars from scratch, surely they could figure out how to build affordable housing. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from the hotel where they'd placed James. The night manager reported that 3 other Tesla employees had quietly approached him, admitting they too had been living in their cars. The problem was bigger than anyone had realized. Musk stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the lights of Silicon Valley spread below. The region that had created so much innovation and wealth had also created an unsustainable situation for the very people who made that innovation possible. He returned to his desk and began typing rapidly. The plan forming in his mind wasn't just about building houses, it was about reimagining the relationship between employers and employees. What if Tesla could create a model that other companies could follow? By sunrise, he had filled several pages with notes and calculations. The initial numbers were daunting. Developing affordable housing would require a significant investment. But as he ran the long-term projections, another picture emerged. Happier employees meant better retention, higher productivity, and stronger company loyalty. It wasn't just the right thing to do, it made business sense. By the time the meeting ended 2 hours later, they had the beginnings of a plan. It wasn't just about building houses, it was about building a community. A place where Tesla employees could live, work, and thrive without choosing between basic necessities. As people filed out of the conference room, Musk noticed John from accounting lingering behind. "Something on your mind?" Musk asked. John hesitated, then spoke quietly. "My sister, she works in assembly. She's been living in her car too, but she was too ashamed to tell anyone." This is going to change lives, sir." Musk nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility even more heavily. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about doing right by the people who had helped build Tesla from the ground up. Later that afternoon, as he reviewed the first draft of the Housing Assistance Program, his phone buzzed with a message. It was a photo from the hotel where they placed James. He was smiling for the first time since Musk had met him, holding up a room key like it was made of gold. Sometimes, Musk thought, the biggest innovations don't come from engineering breakthroughs or technological advances. Sometimes they come from simply opening your eyes to what's right in front of you and deciding to make a change. Elon Musk sat in his office early that morning, his desk covered with employee housing data and cost of living reports. He hadn't slept much after getting James settled in the hotel. The discovery that one of his best engineers had been homeless had shaken him more than he cared to admit. The morning sunlight was just beginning to stream through the windows when his assistant brought in another stack of reports he requested. These ones detailed employee commute times, salary ranges, and local housing costs. The numbers were troubling, to say the least. "Have you seen these figures?" he asked, pushing a report across the desk to Linda from HR, who'd arrived early at his urgent request. "The average commute time for our factory workers is over 2 hours each way. Some are driving from as far as Sacramento just to afford housing." Linda nodded grimly. "We've been seeing an increase in tardiness and fatigue-related incidents." People are exhausted from these commutes, but they can't afford to live closer. Musk ran his hands through his hair, his mind racing with calculations. And it's not just the factory workers. Even our engineers, people making six figures, are struggling. James isn't an isolated case, he's just the one we found out about. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the parking lot where he'd made his discovery the night before. Already, employees were starting to arrive for the morning shift. How many of them were one crisis away from the same situation as James? "I want every department head in the conference room in an hour," he announced, turning back to Linda. "And get me someone from real estate development. We own land around here that we're not using. Maybe it's time we put it to better use." The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. As people began filing into the conference room, Musk noticed the dark circles under many eyes, the tired slump of shoulders. Had he been too focused on building the future to see what was happening right in front of him? "Last night," he began, once everyone was seated, "I discovered that one of our top engineers has been living in his car for the past 3 months. The room fell silent. Not because he's bad with money, not because he made poor choices, but because a combination of medical bills and Bay Area housing costs made it impossible for him to keep both a roof over his head and food on his table. He clicked through a presentation showing the housing cost data. This isn't just about one engineer. Our own numbers show that 60% of our workforce is spending more than half their income on housing. People are commuting from hours away, sleeping in their cars, or cramming multiple families into single apartments. This ends today." The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Musk held up his hand for silence. "I've already approved emergency housing assistance for any employee currently experiencing housing insecurity. That's the Band-Aid. But we need surgery here, not just a Band-Aid. We need real solutions." He pulled up a map showing Tesla's property holdings around the factory. "We have 30 acres of unused land within a 5-mile radius of this facility. I want proposals on my desk by the end of the week for how we can develop this into affordable housing for our employees." One of the executives raised his hand. "Sir, becoming a housing developer, that's not exactly in our wheelhouse. The regulations alone." "Neither was building electric cars when we started," Musk interrupted. "Neither was reusable rockets at SpaceX. We solve hard problems here. That's what we do. And right now, our people need us to solve this one." He clicked to the next slide, showing a preliminary sketch of a housing development. "I want solar panels on every roof. I want these units to be energy efficient and sustainable. I want them to be something our employees are proud to call home. And I want them to be affordable on a factory worker's salary." The room was now fully engaged, with people taking notes and already starting to brainstorm ideas. Musk could see the spark of innovation he loved so much beginning to ignite. "One more thing," he added, his voice growing serious. "This stays in this room for now. The last thing we need is for this to turn into a media circus before we have real solutions to offer. Our people deserve better than empty promises and PR stunts." As the meeting continued, ideas began flowing. Someone suggested incorporating Tesla's energy storage solutions into the housing development to lower utility costs. Another proposed a points system where employees could earn equity in their units over time. He developed a routine: wake up early, before most employees arrived, head to the gym for a shower and change of clothes, work his regular shift, often staying late to use the office amenities and Wi-Fi, then back to his car, where he'd read engineering papers on his phone until he fell asleep. The strange thing was, his work actually improved during this time. Without any distractions, he poured himself into Tesla's battery research, channeling all his pain and loss into solving complex engineering problems. Every breakthrough felt like keeping his promise to May, making beautiful things, making the world better. But now, standing in this hotel room, James felt something he hadn't in months: hope. Not just because Elon Musk had discovered his situation, but because for the first time since Me's death, someone had seen him, really seen him, as more than just an engineer with good ideas. His phone buzzed with a message. It was from Tesla's HR department, requesting a meeting later that morning. James took one last look in the mirror, straightened his shoulders, and grabbed his laptop bag. Whatever happened next, he would face it with the same determination that had kept him going these past months. As he headed down to the hotel lobby, he touched the wedding ring he still wore. "I'm keeping my promise, May," he whispered. "I'm not giving up." Somehow, he felt certain that today would bring changes he never could have imagined when he'd fallen asleep in his car just yesterday. The next morning, sitting in a modest hotel room provided by Tesla, James stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. It was the first time in months he'd woken up in a real bed, and the simple luxury of a hot shower had almost brought him to tears. As he straightened his collar, his mind wandered back to how different his life had been just a year ago. He and Mai had lived in a cozy apartment in San Jose, filled with her paintings and the little succulents she loved to grow. Every morning, they'd share coffee on their small balcony, planning their future together. Mai worked as an art teacher at a local elementary school, and her students adored her. She had a way of bringing color and joy into every space she entered. The headaches started small, just occasional discomfort that they both brushed off as stress. But then came the day Mai collapsed while teaching her class. The diagnosis that followed was like a bomb dropping on their perfectly planned life. An aggressive brain tumor, rare and complex. James picked up his phone from the hotel desk, opening his photo gallery to a picture he looked at every morning, Mai sitting in her hospital bed, still smiling, still planning their future even as the treatments got harder. "We'll beat this," she'd say, her determination never wavering even when the experimental treatments began draining their savings. They'd tried everything: traditional treatments, experimental procedures, alternative therapies, anything that offered even a glimmer of hope. Their insurance covered the standard treatments, but the more experimental options had to be paid out of pocket. They emptied their savings, maxed out credit cards, and took out loans. James would have sold his soul if it meant saving May. For 8 months, their life revolved around hospital visits and treatment schedules. James worked remotely whenever possible, his laptop becoming a permanent fixture in May's hospital room. His Tesla colleagues were supportive, giving him the flexibility he needed to be there for every appointment, every treatment, every moment he could steal with her. But cancer didn't care about their love story, their dreams, or their determination. 6 months ago, on a quiet Sunday morning, Mai had squeezed his hand one last time. Her final words were telling him to keep chasing his dreams at Tesla, to keep working on making the world better. "Promise me you won't give up," she'd whispered. "Promise me you'll keep making beautiful things." After the funeral, the bills started pouring in. Insurance had covered much of the standard treatment, but the experimental procedures and alternative therapies they tried had left James with debt that seemed insurmountable. Their apartment, once filled with so much love and light, now felt impossibly expensive and painfully empty. He tried to keep up with everything at first: the rent, the medical bills, the regular bills. But living in the Bay Area was like trying to swim upstream in a tsunami. Even with his engineer's salary, the numbers just didn't add up. Something had to give. The decision to move into his car hadn't come all at once. First, he started looking for cheaper apartments, but everything within commuting distance of Tesla was still far out of reach with his debt payments. He thought about finding a roommate, but the idea of living with strangers in the midst of his grief felt impossible. So one night, after looking at his bank account for the 100th time, he packed what he could fit into his Honda Civic. He put Mi's paintings and most of their furniture in a small storage unit, gave notice to his landlord, and began his new life as someone technically homeless. The first few nights were the hardest. He'd park in different spots around the city, trying to stay safe while getting enough sleep to function at work. Eventually, he discovered that the Tesla parking lot was actually the perfect spot. It was well lit, had security, and being close to work meant he could shower in the employee gym before his shift. James managed a small, sad smile. "After everything with May, I guess I couldn't ask for more help. It felt like failing somehow. And the work has been the one thing keeping me going. I didn't want anything to jeopardize that." The sun had fully set now, and the parking lot lights were humming to life. Musk stood up, his decision already made. "Pack your things, James. You're not sleeping here tonight." "Sir, I appreciate it, but I don't need." "This isn't charity," Musk interrupted. "This is me refusing to let one of my most valuable engineers sleep in a car. Pack your things. We're going to fix this, not just for you, but for anyone else at Tesla who might be one crisis away from the same situation." As James slowly began gathering his belongings, Musk pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. By morning, this would be more than just helping one employee, it would be the beginning of something much bigger. But for tonight, the first step was making sure James had a proper place to sleep. What Musk didn't know as he helped James load his modest belongings into his Tesla was that this chance encounter would lead to one of the most significant changes in how Silicon Valley companies approached employee welfare. But that was tomorrow's challenge. Tonight was about making sure one brilliant engineer didn't have to sleep in his car. The sun was setting over Tesla's Fremont factory, casting long shadows across the massive parking lot. Elon Musk had just finished a meeting about the company's latest battery innovations when something caught his eye through the conference room window. A lone figure was walking between the cars, carrying what looked like a small gym bag. Normally, Musk wouldn't have paid much attention. Employees came and went at all hours in a company that never truly slept. But there was something familiar about this person. After a moment, he realized it was James Chen, one of their most talented battery engineers. James had been instrumental in several breakthrough developments over the past year, and Musk had personally congratulated him during last month's team meeting. But why was James wandering through the parking lot at this hour? The day shift had ended hours ago, and James wasn't scheduled for the night shift. Curiosity getting the better of him, Musk decided to head down to the parking lot. The California evening was cooling rapidly as Musk made his way through the rows of parked cars. He found James near the far end of the lot, sitting in the driver's seat of an older model Honda Civic, reading something on his phone by the dome light. Musk knocked gently on the window, trying not to startle him. James looked up, surprise and something else. Was that embarrassment? Flashing across his face, he quickly rolled down the window. "Mr. Musk, I didn't expect to see you here this late." "Just finished up a meeting," Musk replied casually, noting how the back seat of the car was filled with neatly folded clothes and a small cooler. "I saw you walking out here and thought I'd say hello. You've been doing exceptional work on the new battery design." "Thank you, sir. It's been really exciting to work on something that could change the future of electric vehicles." James's enthusiasm was genuine, but Musk could see the fatigue in his eyes. "You're here pretty late. Everything okay?" James hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with his phone. "Yes, everything's fine. I like to get some extra work done when it's quiet." But Musk's attention had been caught by several details: a rolled-up sleeping bag, partially hidden under a jacket, a small electric kettle in the cup holder, and what looked like a toiletry bag on the passenger seat. The pieces started falling into place. "James," Musk said quietly, "are you living in your car?" The silence that followed was heavy. James looked down at his hands, then back up at Musk, his expression a mix of pride and resignation. Yes, sir, for about 3 months now." His voice was steady, but quiet. "But I want to assure you it hasn't affected my work. I've met all my deadlines, and the battery project is ahead of schedule." Musk felt his chest tighten. Here was one of his most innovative engineers, someone whose work could revolutionize electric vehicle technology, sleeping in a car in the company parking lot. "Would you mind telling me how this happened?" Musk asked, pulling up a nearby concrete barrier to sit on. He wasn't leaving until he understood the full story. James took a deep breath. "My wife, May, she got sick last year, really sick. We had insurance, but there were experimental treatments that weren't covered. We used all our savings, took out loans. She wanted to try everything possible." His voice trailed off, and Musk noticed how he twisted the wedding ring on his finger. "After she passed, I was left with the medical bills. Between that and the Bay Area rent, I had to make a choice. I could either pay the bills or keep my apartment. I chose to pay the bills. I figured living in my car would be temporary, just until I could save up enough for a security deposit somewhere cheaper. But housing costs keep rising, and even with my salary, catching up feels impossible." Musk listened, his mind already racing with calculations and possibilities. This wasn't just about one engineer. If someone with James's salary was struggling this much, how many other employees might be in similar situations? "Why didn't you come to HR? To me?" "Tesla has programs to help employees in crisis.